That was Viking War Chant. I think there was about 40,000 people doing that one there. You can even find Viking football games. They're doing it at that now to hype up the crowd and everything and get the team going good right before the game. And at the very end, they blow a gala horn. And, whenever I tell you all the time that things surround me all the time, and a lot of times it's in video games and crap, there's this game called Destiny, futuristic robotic floater shoot around game, and stuff. You end up going around on land speeders quite often, just like Star Wars and stuff, and fight people. And one of the coolest things you used to be able to get in there was a Galahorn. I even hear that they redid it. So that's neat. But what's that got to do? Got to do with all of this? You look at this picture, and I ask you what you're seeing now, and I guess you see a pentagram and a witch's castle kind of thing that looks like something out of the monsters, right? Well, if we look at it a little closer, in the top right hand corner up here, in a shadowy form, right over in here, there's a snake. And that's the snake of the Metallica album that they call the Black Album. But if you look in the sheen of it, it's got a snake. So it's got a hidden snake type idea. And album covers are notorious for having this type of stuff, but we don't have albums anymore. In fact, a lot of you probably listening to me don't know what an album is anymore. Really, CDs have gotten to be ancient and old, but a CD would look just like this thing over here. In fact, you used to have a Rush CD that looked just like this, and if you remember the old rock band Rush, or look them up, it would show this star inside a circle, this man trapped inside of it, which effectively is Vitruvian Man, if you can see him in the shadow of it and how it works. He's surrounded by Celtic information. And this witch's castle that you're looking at over here has dragon heads all around on the top of it, and serpent symbology. Hell, it's got scales all over it that are the scales of a dragon. In just a minute though, if you look right there, it's got a cross. So what's up with that? Well, I'm going to try to put all this together, sacred geometry and a lot of things, or this guy is doing this with the article and talking about it, and I'm going to go into it a little deeper and do the thing that I do with it. But whenever I tell you it surrounded me all the time whenever I was a kid, well, it was because I was into Halloween like crazy, and witches and the stuff, and the idea of that. Listening to these Rush albums with these pictures like this on there, and symbology like on Journey album covers, and all these other guys, and songs that they had, Wheel in the Sky and all these things, and it's like it all goes together. That's just so weird, and but it's just makes sense. And a lot of people were just like numb to it. And I'd bring up sometimes, we'd be out cruising around partying and stuff, and I would hey, check out, this song is about da 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 and everything, yeah. And I'd go, well, think about this, and da 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 da, and they were like, what the hell? And I go, it's from long ago. There are these things, and they explain it all to these people, and we'd kick on and kick the cassette or whatever in it, and listen to it and everything, and a totally different ideal came out of it. And I remember loving Rush album always had the lyrics in it, and sleeves and things that they had, and some other things. And like Yes had real cool album covers and stuff, but to be able to read the lyrics of Rush was kind of cool because it gave you another insight. And quite often as kids, and they're yelling in these songs and everything, and you might misconstrue what they said, and it's amazing when you actually get the words in front of you and try to put it together, especially songs like Kubla Khan and Xanadu and things like this that they had, and Decree by the Pleasure Dome and all these situations. But what do these symbols have to do with each other, and how can we put together snakes and an ancient witch castle and Vitruvian Man and devil worshipping pentagram. What the hell is all this going on with Celtic stuff? What is that? Well, let's look into the Viking serpent worship, sacred geometry, and the secrets of Celtic church in Norway. If this goes past part 1 into part 2, it'll be in your top left hand corner, and I'll release them at the same time, so you'll be able to go to the next of it. I'll try to mention it at the bottom because it's quite an extensive article and I can't shut up. You know the Da Vinci Code? Well, he talks about that a little bit here in the findings of things. Dan Brown wrote the Da Vinci Code, inspired by Henry Lincoln and his 2 co-authors, the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. The Norwegian researcher Harold Bulk, who is the one that writes this article here, was inspired by the same book. Lincoln's tantalizing bait was religion and sacred geometry, especially the sacred pentagram. In the opening scene of the Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown featured a dying man who had inscribed a pentagram onto his stomach with his own blood. You remember the scene? Religion, sacred geometry, and suspense were the ingredients that kept audiences spellbound, but it was mainly fiction. And here we see a inscribed pentagram. We're all familiar with this. Well, what would this have to do with... Hold on. We'll wait for it. This gets pretty good, guys. What Harold found, however, is not fiction. In researching Norway's Viking history and Norway's conversion into Christianity, he was led to profound discoveries. These surpassed by far even the astonishing geometry discovered in the blood-soaked soil of the Languedoc area of southern France, where the Gnostic Cathars had been killed by the thousands by the Catholic Church, and the Templars had many of their strongholds. And I could literally go off for an hour right now on that situation and what had happened during that small period in time. It's about the earliest that I really like to get to, because anything that gets closer starts to get real personal. In fact, things like this do. In fact, the more that I've gotten into it, the more things start to get personal attached back. But a completely different story regarding Norway's conversion was revealed. Rather than the heretofore accepted one that's currently told to everybody pretty much, Harold discovered what is now called the Norwegian pentagram, other enormous geometric patterns with symbolic measurements, constructed with the help of cities built during the conversion years, about 900 to 1100 AD, to act as markers. And lo and behold, it was seen that Norway had not been converted by the Roman Catholics that has always been accepted in the story. What? Well, it gets a little deeper. I like this. It keeps showing up, this little hip pouch thing that looks like a holsterish type situation, and then you get this wrap that's around you that looks like a Seropia moth. That's like the biggest moth in her, but I don't know why she's wearing a deer mask helmet and stuff. 85% on it, beyond king though. So let's talk about the astonishing discovery of sacred geometry and ancient symbols. Just a part of it. I'll add a little to this, but whenever we get into sacred geometry, we'll go into much deeper aspects of it, I guess. The pentagram is for many a mysterious, foreboding, and fateful and intimidating symbol. The Catholic Church must take credit for turning the pentagram from a symbol of the sacred feminine to a symbol of the devil. But the pinnacle's demonic interpretation is historically inaccurate. In fact, if you look at it, what they were doing was, if you flip it upside down to where the major point of the star, instead of being at the top, is at the bottom, you can make a satanic symbol out of it. But this, in a way, is just a yin-yang, if you will. And so, well, that's a little dark, isn't it? And so it's working off the masculine, feminine situation off of it too, because whenever you put a double triangle together, you're putting this situation together of the yin and yang. That's just as simple as the yin and yang symbol itself, just being two things slightly encroaching on each other with a little of the essence of each other already in it, rolling around in a circle. It has had many meanings in many cultures, tracing back in time many thousands of years. The use of 1.618, called the golden section or golden mean, in sacred architecture is prevalent throughout Europe. And this is only one of the many variations of a sacred number that you get. Not only is there simplistic ones like 12, but there's ones like 108, even complex numbers like 144,200. You're like, what? Yeah, it complex numbers, but it all works off in geometry, and even some of them show up in your Bible as naming off the number of people there are, and the 72, and what is this? What's this 54 and 108? What's it got to do with everything? I'll get into that in other videos and touch upon it some in here, but this sacred section, what he's talking about here, is something that's been seen in architecture and all kinds of things, and it goes way back. But also it's the declamation of how far it off is if you took a straight up and down and side to side X, and you were to put the star on it, how it goes at an angle, and it goes at an angle. Each of these kicks it off. And if you're kicking it off on a circle at any sides and let it roll around, what it ends up doing is making that same representation to the four corners, but it's a five-pointed star. Isn't that unique? But worse than that, or more or deeper than that, this is exactly what the planet Venus appears to do to ancient astrologers and to people to this day, as it pops up and it goes down and it pops up and it goes down. It, like the spirograph whenever I was a kid, I hope you've seen these before, but they would take this wheel thing and a wheel inside of it, and you'd stick a pin in certain holes, and then you would roll the thing around, and as you rolled it around like gears in a clock, it would start making designs. But even though you're going around and around, your pin was effectively, because of where it was placed on this round and round device, was going chink, 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 chink. There's your star. But now, chink, it starts just a hair to the left, and chink, hair to the left, hair to the left, and slowly makes this little star or things like that. And there was ones that were just sacred, a flower of life, straight up pentagrams, things like this that you could do. And it's just whichever one you were using versus whichever hole that you chose to use inside of it. And they had a bunch of them, all kinds of kaleidoscope ideas. And my sister had one of those cool pins that had like 5 different colors in it, where it was one big old giant pin, and you click the thing down for red or green, blue, black, and I don't know, I think it had green and some other color, and it had some other color anyhow, and maybe it was just 5. And so you could do it with a few different ones and end up with cool colors out of it and everything. Or you could do one out of just black and then color in the little sections of different places, and it would make this kaleidoscope pattern and stuff like that. And hey, it's just some little kid's game, right? But actually, something like that in the possession of somebody, think about it, just a couple of thousand years ago, where they were made out of perhaps brass or bronze, and they were geared to where you could do something like that with little holes in it, and with a pin stuck in it in some way, and draw on a piece of paper or papyrus that it was sitting upon. Would have been a strange thing to think about, but the same type of thing was all used in maritime. And you see the guy with the compass, and he takes it and he's walking it over and doing these things onto it, and it's pieces of circles. there are amounts of daytime and travel and situations and where you could go and then where you should be. So if I'm this far, then this is where the stars should be and what does it look like? And they get out the sextant and they check the thing out. Are you all with me? Because we think of this quite often going back only to Pythagoras, but in my sacred geometry thing, I'm going to show you about that and how some of the Greeks is just a culmination of things from earlier ages. In fact, that's kind of what the Greeks were. But Pythagoreans considered that the pentagram was an emblem of perfection, or the symbol of the human being. In a way, you might say it is the fingerprint of God. Isn't it hard to believe? Because I'm sure whenever you grew up, as I did, that's got to be some devil worshipping thing, and you're going to see it on a witch and stuff like that, right? Well, we'll get to the witch thing here in a minute, but strangely, what has this got to do with man, and how could it be the measure of man? Well, Protagoras said that man was the measure of all things. So there is this concept that the sacred geometry that is everything in the world, like in plants and pine cones and all kinds of things, and in spirals running around and seashells and nautilus and things like this, are actually found within us too, because we're all part of this star stuff, like Carl Sagan used to say, right? So what's this got to do with man is the measure of all things? Well, this sacred geometry, when we get into it, will show you that. Let's see if I can get this lighter to light. Seriously. It's just about out. Well, no, it's got some in it, but it was all in the other side. Okay. The liquid's all in one side. Anyhow, guys. So, the fingerprints of God. And people were looking in math in certain ways to try to find God, and this is alchemy. And these sacred geometry situations that are found in Masonic stuff, and it goes from as simple as how you make a cubistone square to what makes up everything in the cosmos. And they had this back in a time that nobody really knew what was out there, and there was a belt of many stars and all this. But if we look deeper into what they thought at the time and what they had figured out, it goes pretty incredible. The Sumerians had ancient trigonometry and stuff way before these people that are accredited with having trigonometry, or having created it. Poof! Well, it turns out that they had popcorn before those guys even had corn to make popcorn out of. The pentagram incorporates the golden section of 1.168. It is constructed using this number and this number only. It can be said that the pentagram is the visualization of the golden section of 1.618. And here we have what's known as Vitruvian Man. And he's cut into sections, and if you look at it, where's my pointer? If you'll look, there are declamations on his arm for little sections here, and sections off to where his arm and his chest are done in different ones. A section hit his midsection, does one below the knees, you'll see in just a section. And you can see the circle going around doesn't quite fit, but if he clocks it up about here, which is also using that ratio, hot dang, it suddenly looks like he would be hanging on a cross, doesn't it? What ding? So you can see that thing, the section at his knees too. Well, where can we see stuff like this? You can see the ancient Egyptians using this same situation, blocked into cutting points from large sections of the body to whenever they get to the head, and then they break it down into the sections of the head, and whenever they do, that breaks down into that golden spiral type situation. Yeah, they've got that in a grid, and the way they draw it in a grid shows you that section. So, he tells you that's the real Da Vinci Code, is Vitruvian Man. Proportional relationship of the parts reflect universal design. Now might be a good time to interject some stuff that's got to do with that size then that we're talking about. Most people know that an inch is really that section of your finger, pretty much, or usually that top one there, a section of your finger, right? And it was supposedly based on some king long ago. And once we got it set, right? But in the ancient days, it used to float around a little bit. For a time there, it floated around to how long the damn king's arms and his feet were, and things like this. But was a foot ever a foot? Because damn, that's pretty big. And so he must have been a giant, aka Gilgamesh. Oh no. But he was only 3/4 a god. So you look at this 1 inch and how these things break down, and I'll just try to stay with me whenever I just tell you this simply, see if I can pull this out correctly. There's 12 inches in a foot, right? And 12 is sacred, and it comes from the Sumerians and their numbers, which weren't based on straight tens, but off 6, 12, 60. Hexadecimal, basically, like our computers. There's 12 months in a year, 12 hours in a day and a night, 12 pairs of ribs. You have 12 cranial nerves on you. That's about the age that girls start menstruation and boys start growing hair, so it changes you, and then you're a teen. We could do a whole video on teen and what that is between and the difference of, but and what it taint. There's 12 apostles. Atomic mass of carbon is 12. Yeah, based, so that's 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons, and oh, isn't that special? There's 12 corners on a cross. Yeah, when you draw that thick square little cross right there, there'd be 12 corners all based around it. 12 legions of angels, 12 tribes originally, and it goes a lot deeper. But the section of a mile is also working off this same standard. For the amount of an inch to the stride of a normal man, meaning a left foot and a right foot, as in you see the Egyptians taking that step, ding, left foot, right foot, being a difference of about 5.28 foot originally, times 100 is actually a mile. But in the section of the step and the pace of a man, 1, 2, right foot, left foot, to an inch is also the difference of the earth size to the sun. It is also the difference of the measure to the moon and to, no, it doesn't work that way. It's the measure of, yeah, I was right. And it's the measure of the diameter of the moon in differential to the size of the sun, but the sun is 400 times away, right? i.e. 40 or 400 like you see in the Bible a lot, but it's 400 times larger, so it eclipses it and it makes it work perfectly. That's based into the pyramid too, and what's odd is they can find that the pyramid's based on the place that is not only on some type of leyland line, but it also is in the geometric center of Earth on the old world, of all of Asia and Europe and everything. You figure in the land masses, and it's really within a few feet, few thousand feet Giza is right there on it, which is another strange thing. I'll have to get into all these declamations where you have a furlong and it's 660 foot, and then how this breaks down into foot and mile, and how we still use it today, but only in horse racing and all that situation of sacred geometry. But the proportions and all of that, and all of the standards that we've used and measurements that we have used to measure all the way to the circumference of the earth and the distance to the stars as well as our sun, have been used using this measurement. It's why the inch and everything is somewhat sacred, and the foot and the inch and everything. I know everybody tried to go metric and break it down in a different way, but the other had been from long, long ago, and it's built into all these sacred things, and it's actually a measurement which really breaks down to an earthly standard, if you will. So after Harold's discovery of the Norwegian pentagram, which is an enormous geometric patterns with symbolic measurements, and ancient spiritual sites in Norway, creating a pentagram across the landscape, which I showed in an older video. And a larger mystery now confronted this man and all of us, who had placed this sacred geometry across the whole of southern Norway. Who had done this and set it up. For what we're fixing to show you, what we're talking about with these sacred churches. For this laid out thing that you're seeing right here, that is the pentagram, in the center of it is the Church of St. Thomas. And that's supposed to be the brother of Jesus. Are you with me? And all of these points along here are where these ancient churches was. And the only thing that didn't make any sense is that one of them is out of round and out a certain point, and its exact sacred geometry percentage. If we go down here a little bit more too, you can see if we do a circle around Hamar and here at Mount Blickfell, that whenever you take the circles and they cross each other, you have a Vesca Pisces. This is what I was talking about before in the other videos. But also you have an oddity out here at Tonsberg. But in that oddity, it's still on the circles. It's been on this place that's all in this sacred geometry and all laid out. This one right here. There's another one. Oh, well, let me tell you about this. What's odd is these people used to come to these churches and then come to this one, and they would go from there to the Church of St. Thomas once per year during the procession. And this is in a way taking the souls into heaven. And this isn't a Christian thing. This predates it. Yep. So let's look into this a little bit more and what he says about them. So that's the Norwegian pentagram from the Viking Serpent by Harold Bolke. Makes me want it. Makes me want to check it out. So here we have the southern Norway coast with the pentagram and the circle superimposed over it. Just that one that's there. And we're going to mention that Sandy right over here later. And there's another one that's off just a hair that's right there with it. But here's Hamar we were just looking at before. Take it off of there. There it is. Bergen, St. Thomas, right? Tonsberg, which is down here on the coast. So to make this measurement, understand how complex this is, but also understand that the circumference of this circle is 666 miles. And that they did this for the symbolic rebirth situation that had to do with Odin and everything. But it's the same thing as Jesus. And in some way it seems to predate what we're led to believe is Jesus even showing up or somebody knowing about him, right? But then again, we know that Mithra was a Jesus type character, Krishna and all these other people, Buddha to some extent, and so on. So this goes with this. Well, and while we're looking at the Church of St. Thomas, and we're about to look at this one a little bit closer, in the same breath, we're looking at sites that were built upon again whenever they were built upon in the Christian era, and these churches were pretty much left alone. There's another situation just like this in Scotland, a smaller situation, and only one church is left with the iconography, and all the rest of them are ruins, but they're ruins of supposed ancient churches here that all go with it. And I don't think they've ever been really dated or anything along that. So, who may have created a symbolic pentagram in Norway thousands of years ago? What do you think about that? This one's upside down, too. What? Yeah. And it starts at 16 off, 1.1618. Ting, 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 does that same thing. The Pentagon. The pentagram. Pentagon. That's amazing how it all goes together. Well, show you how it goes together a little more. The sacred geometry was not limited to the pentagram. Studying the sagas and other historical works led to discover more geometry. Strange myth and fables that he had dismissed earlier suddenly seemed to make more sense, leading one to exciting discovery after another. The books, the Norwegian pentagram and its English translation, the Viking serpent, came into being. Sounds like I need to check out this book here. But startling history, the Celts brought Christianity to Norway. What? Well, I've showed you this in another video, but let's see what he says about it. The research showed that the Celts brought Christianity to Norway, a fact that has best been played down in our time of enlightenment. The important part of the Celts played in the unification and christening of Norway has been hidden behind a veil pulled down by the Roman Catholic Church as they maneuvered into position within Norway as in the rest of Europe. Dun, dun, dun. In the year 1000 of the Common Era, Norway was still a heathen or pagan country, and contrary to popular belief, it was not the Roman Catholic Church that had struggled to convert the feared Vikings to Christianity. Abundant evidence was found that suggested that certain groupings within the Celtic Church, i.e. the Druids and such, had converted the Vikings to a Christendom type instead. These were Gnostics from the Celtic Church, influenced by the serpent-worshipping Ophites from Egypt, Gatang, and Syria, who used the serpent as a symbol of Christ. Why would they use the symbol? Well, in the church, there was a bunch of symbols for Christ, not only just the cross that he died on, which I'm sure if he came back, he'd be like, really, guys? You know, could you choose another symbol? Well, all the other ones were too telling. Yeah, and there were other ones like he was a unicorn and he was this and he was that. Well, I showed you the hookup and the way that winter goes with the unicorn and the winter unicorn and the herald of rebirth. in a video right at last Christmas, but and you can look it up. But Ophites from Egypt and Syria, and they had this symbol of Christ, and people would think the Bible doesn't have any snake worship in it. And it's like, yeah, no, they do. They have this same type thing in it. In fact, whenever they say they're not doing it, it's what they were. Pardon me. Remember Moses and the brazen serpent? Everybody got scared about snakes, so he actually put up a stanza with a snake on it, a cross with a snake on it. And it supposedly fixed it all, right? Of course, they were bitching in the first place, so he sent brazen serpents up on him. You know, God bad. Started making them try to kill their own brother and everything, but that's not really the story. But you know what I'm talking about. Noah raised up the serpent, right? You know what I'm talking about. You're still with me, right? Cool. After Emperor Constantine in 325 of the Common Era sanctioned the Christian faith, which believed Jesus as being the Son of God, the Gnostics, Arians, Ophites, and other sects were persecuted and dispersed. The persecution of the Gnostics was mainly the work of the influential group that later evolved into what we call today the Roman Catholic Church. And I've explained and showed to you in other videos how the second coming of Christ at Armageddon, or Armageddo, which the Greek word for Megiddo is Armageddon, and how that already went off at 73 AD, exactly to the day that Jesus Christ said that it would at the Mount of Olives. And that Josephus even tells you it was. And who was it that rode in on a white horse? But it was Titus. And that heralded in the next wave of the Roman Catholic Church. For they were just now making his father, Vespasian, the Wasp, which is talk about the end of the Old Testament, whenever they finally are able to get Israel for a short amount of time before all of a sudden they're whooped out again and back in captivity in Babylon and then back out and so on. But they Vespasian, and he was deified as a god, therefore making Titus the son of a god, or the son of God. You still with me? So the persecution of the Gnostics was mainly the work of the influential group that later evolved into what we call today the Roman Catholic Church. And so here's an idea of this serpent on a cross. That looks kind of familiar in a few strange ways, doesn't it? Well, that's that Moses symbology, which I've showed you in typology, keeps showing up again and again and again, and it's why Jesus was done in that way. But it goes back deeper on why Jesus was done in that way, and Odin nailed himself to a tree and all this situation. I can show you in the Bible where it literally says that their Lord and Savior was nailed to a tree in Egypt. So here's this apep snake that you've got to kill, like in Egypt too. It's nailed upon a cross. And funny how it's all coming together. Yeah. And then there's a white rose right next to it. Serpent on the cross, crucified serpent. From the Middle East, the ideas and beliefs of the Gnostic Arians and Ophites disseminated towards the outskirts of Europe. The Arians went as far north as the Iberian Peninsula, while the Ophites apparently found their way to the British Isles, where, according to legends, St. Patrick was sent to Ireland to guide the Celts back to the true faith, under quotes. While there he took time to banish all these serpents, and you've heard he banished all the serpents out of Ireland, sometime during the 5th century, well, apparently without too much success. because we still see some of this iconography there. But it is interesting to note that there have never have been serpents ever in Ireland. So this idea that he drove all the snakes out would be just this convenient thing where it's like, well, I drove all the coconuts out of Antarctica. If there never was coconuts in Antarctica. So Patrick's feat is therefore all the more interesting. The serpents he attempted to banish were probably bipedal. What? That serpent worshippers, serpent people. Those of the Celtic Church who revered the serpent as Jesus. What? Look at this iconography here. He's got the Lucky Charm on top there, the shamrock, but then there's also the fleur-de-lis, and this is St. Patrick. Right here. We've got a long way to go, guys. Almost enough to make another one, and I'll try to make it shorter than the whole thing. Hopefully you're still interested in this. Here he holds the shamrock. It's a green coat. Blue eyes. Halo around him. St. Patrick. A lot of people use him as a savior situation. Stained glass window. And another thing about stained glass windows, it's neat how they were able to make the glass that ends up making this right now. To this day, they have trouble pulling off things that make colors that really emit and glow and radiate out the color like they do. Certain colors and techniques that they used. It's amazing. We're going to go to part 2 now. And so you'll see it coming up in the top left-hand corner, and it'll be probably St. Patrick's face. I don't know. But that's where we'll start the next one at. And we'll see you there. Peace.